אז מה זה exposure? בסדר, מה זה exposure comment ועל מה אנחנו בעצם נדבר. אז אני אתחיל ונדבר קודם בעצם על מה הבעיה. גרטנר יודעים להגדיר בעיות כמו שצריך, ועושים את זה בצורה מאוד יעילה ונקודתית טובה, ולכן בעצם גם בחרתי להשתמש בהגדרה שלהם. מה שאפשר להגיד היום, ואנחנו גם נציג את זה בדוגמאות שלנו, שבעקבות הרבה שינויים והתפתחויות הטכנולוגיות והשינוי שיטות העבודה, הרבה מאוד ארגונים בעצם לא יודעים מה קורה אצלם לגמרי בתוך הארגון. זאת אומרת, משתמשים בחוץ, אפליקציות בחוץ, ותשתיות שמשתנות מהרגע להרגע, ויש לי עוד קלאוד ועוד שירות ועוד הרשאה ועוד משהו מתחבר אחד לשני, והעולם הזה רק הולך וגדל, ובעצם אני לא מכיר את כל מה שיש לי, וכמות הארגונים שבעצם באמת יודעים בכל רגע נתון להגיד מה יש להם או מה אין להם או מה עובד או מה לא עובד, הוא מאוד נמוך. לשם בעצם נכנס הקטגוריה של Controls Assessments. אז מה שבעצם אנחנו אומרים שמעל ל-80% מהארגונים לא יודעים באמת את ה-attack surface שלהם, כי הם לא יודעים מה יש להם, או מה אין להם, או מה מחובר אחד לשני, או מה מתקשר, או מה מוגדר בצורה כזו או אחרת. אז בעצם כמו שאמרנו, אז צוותי IT ואבטחת מידע מתמודדים עם שינויים כל הזמן, שבעצם, סליחה, שבעצם העולם הזה הולך ומתרחב, ושינויים גם הולכים ומתרחבים כל הזמן, והאתגר הופך לקשה מאוד, והצוות חלקו בארץ, חלקו בחול, ותהליכי הפיתוח משתנים, פה יש גיטה, פה יש עוד מערכת, פה יש ביטבקט, והרכש קנה משהו, והמרקטינג קנה משהו, ויש לנו בעצם איזושהי נדידה של הרבה מהדברים האלה, והפערים האלה רק הולכים וגדלים, ובעצם זה מייצר לנו איזשהו מצב שבו בעצם אנחנו מצד אחד מאבדים חלק גדול מהוויזיביליטי שלנו, ומצד שני בעצם הכמות המשטח תקיפה הולך וגדל. ופה בעצם נוצר הפער הזה שאנחנו רוצים מה שנקרא לדבר עליו, כי הפער הזה הוא בעצם משאיר הרבה חלקים מתוך הארגון ללא הגנה או התייחסות, כי לא בהכרח תמיד אנחנו בכלל יודעים עליהם. וכשאנחנו משתמשים בפתרונות של best of breed, שזה מצוין וגישה הגיונית, אבל אין להם אינטגרציה לכל הדאטה שנאסף ביניהם, ונדרשת קורלציה יזומה או אפילו קורלציה ידנית, סליחה, קורלציה ידנית בין המערכות השונות, ואז לא בהכרח אנחנו יכולים לעשות את זה, לא בהכרח יש לנו בעצם את הידע או את הכוח אדם לעשות את זה. אז אנחנו פה בעצם כדי לדבר על CAASM Cyber Attack, Cyber Asset Attack Surface Management, זה בעצם ההגדרה של גרטנר של הדבר הזה, אנחנו בעצם מדברים על משטח תקיפה, על המשטח תקיפה של הארגון, ובעצם להבין כל מה שקורה שם. אז כדי להבין כל מה שקורה שם, אנחנו צריכים המון דאטה, אנחנו צריכים כמויות מאוד גדולות של דאטה, לצורך הערכה וניטור של התשתית, ואנחנו חיים, כמו שציינתי קודם, באיזשהו סביבה דינמית של גם פעילות העסקית, שהיא בעצם ורסטילית, גם האיומים שהולכים ומשתנים כל הזמן, אם מישהו ראה עכשיו את ההתקפה החדשה של גיטהאב, והניהול של הנתונים האלה הוא קשה, הוא קשה מאוד, כמו שציינתי קודם, ודורש מאיתנו בעצם השקעה מאוד גדולה. ואז בעצם יש לנו צוותים שהם במצב של רדיפה, יש יותר מדי נתונים, יש יותר מדי מערכות, אין כוח אדם, לא תמיד יש תקציב, או רגע, אם יש תקציב, אז רגע, עכשיו אני צריך יותר תקציב כדי בעצם לזהות את כל הדברים האלה ולעקוב אחריהם. אז אנחנו מבינים שיש לנו צמיחה של נתונים שמאוד גדולה, והיא מאלצת אותנו בעצם, ואת הצוותים, להתמודד עם מקורות מידע מפוזרים בהכל, וניסיון להבין ולמפות אותם, ובסוף להבין, אוקיי, ככה אפשר לתקיף אותי. למה? כי אני יודע שקורה ככה וככה, או שאני יודע שבעצם חסר לי משהו, ואני אתן פה כמה דוגמאות, לפני שאנחנו בעצם נצלול גם למערכת עצמה. אז אמרנו, המון מערכות, המון נתונים, ובעצם אנחנו מקבלים פחות תובנות, בגלל שאין לנו בעצם תמיד את היכולת לבצע ביניהם את הקורלציה ולהכניס את זה לקונטקסט. וכי המטרה של כל הדבר הזה בסוף להכניס את זה בעצם לאיזושהי קישוריות של מקורות המידע, וככה אנחנו גם נחסוך במשאבים, וגם בעצם יהיה לנו יכולת לזהות דברים בצורה הרבה יותר מהירה. אני אתן בעצם שתי דוגמאות, לא דוגמאות מאוד מסובכות, אבל כן דוגמאות עם הרבה value. אז למשל, זיהוי משתמשים עם הרשאות אדמין, והאם אדמינים מוגנים ב-MFA. אז בשביל לדעת לענות על השאלות האלה, אז אני צריך בעצם קודם כל להתחבר למערכות ה-IAM, ואז להגיד, אוקיי, יש לי משתמשים עם Active Directory, משתמשים ב-Active Directory, באוקטה, להוציא את כל המשתמשים והקבוצות שלהם, לראות בעצם איזה הגדרות חלים עליהם ולאיזה קבוצות הם משוייכים גם, ולהסתכל בעצם על הפעילות שלהם. זאת אומרת, אני אכנס עכשיו גם לדאטה ממערכות הסים, ואז אני אדע להצליב את זה, ואז אני אראה בעצם איפה הוא יתחבר, איפה הוא כן יתחבר, אם הוא יתחבר איפשהו גם ללא MFA, ואז יכול להיות שבמערכת אחת יש לו MFA, במערכת אחרת אולי לא מוגדר לו MFA, ואז בסוף כשאני לוקח את הנתונים האלה, אני אקבל את הדוגמה של הטבלה הזאת, שיש לי בעצם משתמש, ואני רואה בעצם שהוא הצליח להתחבר, וגם ללא MFA, ועשיתי את זה על ידי בעצם אותה הצלבה של מה ההגדרות בפועל של המשתמש, באיזה קבוצות הוא נמצא, ושילוב של כמה מערכות האלה, ובסוף אני מקבל את התשובה לשאלה שלי. וזה אחד הדברים שאנחנו בעצם באים לפתור. דוגמה נוספת, אני רואה הדוגמה הזאת היא בעצם מדברת על זיהוי בעצם של תחנות, שבהם זה קייס פשוט יחסית, אבל הוא קורה המון פעמים. אנחנו רוצים לזהות בעצם תחנות שבהם ה-EDR או האנטיווירוס בעצם לא מותקן, או שהוא לא עובד בצורה תקינה. מה זה אומר לא עובד בצורה תקינה? זה אומר שחסר לו בעצם הרשאות ריצה, כמו במקים למשל, ואז בעצם למרות שהוא מותקן, הוא לא רץ בפועל. עכשיו, כדי לעשות את זה, אני צריך להבין בעצם, אני צריך להתחבר ל-EDR, להבין בעצם ממנו את המידע, איפה הוא רץ והאם יש לו שגיאות, ומצד שני, אני צריך איזושהי מערכת שבעצם מחזיקה לי את כל הנכסים בארגון, אם זה מערכות כמו Landsweeper או Intune או ServiceNow וכדומה, שבעצם מחזיקות לי את כל האסטים שיש לי בארגון. אני לוקח את הדאטה הזה, אני מצליב ביניהם, ואז אני בעצם שואל שאלות. האם יש מה שנקרא שוויון בין התחנות שיש לי לכמות ה-EDRים שיש לי, והאם על כל תחנה יש את ה-EDR, האם יש על כל תחנה EDR והוא באמת עובד בפועל ומותקן בה, ואז בעצם אם אין לי איפשהו, אז פה אני אדע להצליב את זה ולהרים את הדגל בצורה מאוד פשוטה ולהגיד, וואלה, רגע, שנייה, אין לי פה את זה, יש לי פה תחנות שה-EDR לא מותקן, או שהוא לא עובד תקין. ואני עושה את זה בצורה מאוד פשוטה, אוטומטית לגמרי, יכול גם לייצר מזה דשבורדים, ואנחנו מה שנקרא, נראה את זה גם בדוגמאות.
Perfect. Hi, everyone. Can you see my screen okay?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Perfect. And just to double check, you can see when I change tabs, yeah?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, welcome everyone. My name is David Higgs. I'm the Senior Security Solution Engineer for Rapid7 for the EMEA channel. And yes, today I'm going to be taking you through Rapid7's Exposure Command platform. So where I like to start is with the problem. So year on year, we are seeing more vulnerabilities. 2024, there was around about 40,000 new vulnerabilities, more than the National Vulnerability Database could even keep up with. So much so that, just as a side tangent, Rapid7 are also introducing AI tools to help with vulnerability classification when the National Vulnerability Database can't keep up with the demand for the number of CVEs coming in. We also see misconfigurations around things like multi-factor, and as always, social engineering is a big thing. We see here from the Rapid7 threat report, just the statistics at the bottom here. These are statistics for initial access for threat actors into end user environments. Now we can see here 41% of that initial access was down to misconfigured or non-configured multi-factor. 30% was down to vulnerability exploitation, and 12% was down to social engineering. Now, these are figures for, they were at the beginning of 2024, so they represent the year of 2023. I can tell you that this year's report, we had an increase in the multi-factor figure, so that's now looking at around 56%, so it's going up. So firstly, why is that going up? Organizations have a plethora of tools across their environment, SaaS tools, on-premise tools that the IT operations team and security teams need to have visibility of and to manage. They need to be able to create policies, enforce policies, create checks, cross-checks, and because of the sheer amount of tools, this is causing the issue. So what do we do with Surface Command is we like to bring all of that tooling and visibility into a centralized place. And we have a graph database in the back end, which then means we can then start to run queries against these different data sets and compare them to each other. And so what we end up with is, you see here on the top line, we are able to then surface things like identities with and without multi-factor configured, we're able to surface assets that have been vulnerability scanned against assets that haven't been vulnerability scanned. And then finally, surfacing assets that have endpoint security and ones that don't have endpoint security. And you'll see that these figures nicely line up with these initial access vectors here. So just purely focusing on these 3 points here allows you to cover up to 83% of all initial access vectors into your environment. So let's tell you a bit about how we do this. What we do is we take lots of information sources. So this will be, yes, your vulnerability management, your cloud security from Rapid7, but we also ingest other sources. So let's say, for example, you are already a Tenable or Qualys customer, or you have Wiz or Orca for your cloud security, for example. We can ingest those as data sources into our platform. Now, with the bundles, we obviously include the likes of Insight VM and Insight CloudSec, which makes things cheaper. But if you have these tools in place already, it's not a limitation to using the platform. On top of that, we would add things in like Active Directory, your EDR tool, also the native cloud provider APIs we would connect to audit the infrastructure as well. And all of that then brings in all that great data into our command platform. From there, once we've connected the data sources, we then have a correlation engine in the back end. So we have machine learning algorithms that will look at the asset data and cross-correlate those against each other. So we will be able to correlate the same asset across AWS, across your EDR tool, across your vulnerability management as well. We'll be able to correlate the same identity again across your Azure environment, Active Directory, and then bring that data in, contextualize it using, for instance, if you've got a CMDB like ServiceNow, we can bring that in, that contextualized information into our platform. This really helps when it comes to driving things like accountability. So having that asset owner information is really, really important. And that then allows us to prioritize and respond, because we're not necessarily just fixing vulnerabilities, exposures to CVEs. We have things like misconfigurations to think about as well. And an attacker may not just be using one or the other. Yes, they might be chaining several vulnerabilities together, or might be chaining several misconfigurations together, or they might be using a combination of both. So it's gaining this visibility that allows us to prioritize our response to your most important exposures. Just to give you a bit of an idea as to how we do this. So again, we will be importing data from various information sources like you see here. We get all of that great asset information. We'll then enrich that with threat information and vulnerability information and controls information as well across all of these different tools. And then through that filtering process, we end up with what we would call your true attack surface. So let's, before I jump into the tool, talk about the different parts of the product. So we have that asset inventory piece, and there's a lot of competitive solutions out there that do different things of each of these. What we're packaging with the command platform is that we do them all. So it's the asset inventory, it's your external attack surface management. One of the modules I will show you in this presentation is our ability to add what we would call seed assets. So these are IP addresses, FQDNs. Rapid7 will then go off and do DNS lookups on the FQDNs, reverse lookups on the IP addresses, so that we can attempt to discover any IPs or FQDNs that belong to your organization that you haven't given us. And this happens all the time because we have different departments may spin up different resources. And then from there, what we will do is look at our data from, we have a open source project called, I forget the name. We have an open source project that essentially scans the internet for open services. So these are open ports and open services. We will then surface that information to you, along with enriching that data from the likes of the Showdown project as well. So we will then surface CVEs as an attacker would see them. The next part of the platform is the CAASM piece, so the cyber asset attack surface management. We then are able to pull in all of that internal data, give you that missing telemetry around threats and exposures. And then the next stage is our risk-based vulnerability management here with the likes of Inside VM, but also those other tools, as I mentioned earlier, we can ingest data from third-party vulnerability management platforms. All of that then combines to the Rapid7 Surface Command platform. So let's jump into the platform now. Let's go back to our homepage. Okay, let's give you a quick tour of the homepage. So those three key statistics that I mentioned first time round, we have our assets with endpoint security, assets with and without vulnerabilities assessed, and assets with and without multi-factor shown here. We also have other things from the rest of the tooling on our platform. So we have things like top remediations, new and versus remediated vulnerabilities versus risk scores, so we can track that over time. We also have time to assign and close investigations. So that's if you have our SIEM tools as well, we will be bringing this data into the homepage, and then top investigations by priority. So this again is activity within your environment. This is separate to the exposure command stuff, but would include the likes of Insight IDR. So we surface all of our point solutions within the homepage here. The other thing that you'll see, we have these emergent threat details here. So with our intelligence services, what we do is we have the Rapid7 Emergent Threat Team. This team focuses on evolving threats in cyberspace and exclusively focuses on widespread, high impact emergent threats. So the recent VMware vulnerability that was noted to be exploited in the wild fulfilled the criteria. We have the blog post here, and what I will show you is within the risk view, we have the remediation hub. And from within here, we can actually look at the remediation for these emergent threats. So I'll come to that in a bit. So what I want to start with is let's look at our assets with without endpoint security. So immediately I can drill down just through clicking on this item here. And we can see that the classification class, we have workstations and servers. Our machine learning algorithms work in the background to automatically classify assets. So if you have any, for instance, if you have any IoT devices or cameras, etc., things that maybe you don't want a vulnerability scan to actually run on, we would classify accordingly, and actually that wouldn't count towards your license count. We then have endpoint protection is either false or null. So I'm focusing here on assets without endpoint protection that are servers or workstations. The other thing I could do is I could then filter by sources. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to some assets that are listed in our CMDB. So I'm selecting ServiceNow as one of the required filters. I'm going to select this asset here. We're going to expand the information. And I can show you here all of the different information sources that have been correlated against this asset. So we have a general tab. This is effectively like the normalized information that has been pulled from all of these different sources into the general tab. Scrolling down, we have here visibility on how we have done that correlation. So I can show you here, we correlated the MAC address, the machine qualified host name, and the unqualified host name as well across all of these different sources. So we're very transparent about how we are doing that correlation. We can see here we've got some vulnerabilities listed against the asset. Scrolling up, I can obviously go into each section and view the detail accordingly. What I can also do from here, if I wanted to, I have this additional section where I can, if I wanted to, I could view the remediations for those CVEs. I could actually look at a graphical view of the asset as well. So this would then take me off to the graphical layout of the platform, what it's doing now is it's interrogating the graph database in the background. So here I have the asset itself, and then all of the other information types surrounding it. Now, what I can do is I can clear this up a little bit if I want. Maybe we will, let's just lose those. Now, what I can also do here in this instance is I can take a look at the subnet here and expand the subnet. And what this does is it then gives me again, a graphical view of all the other devices within that same subnet. And then we can, of course, look at different ones to see, okay, if I wanted to, I could expand any number of these. So it's just a really nice way to get an idea of your infrastructure, particularly as we often have cases where we will be talking to like a new CISO who has just arrived at the business. Normally it can take them up to 12 months just to get an idea of the environment. Whereas when we have a tool like Surface Command in place and pull all of those information sources in, it's really, really fast for them to actually get up to speed and understand their environment. Equally, the average length of service of generally like security teams or IT operations tends to be around the sort of 3 to 5 year mark. And with that comes knowledge that is lost. So for instance, we've all been in those situations where someone has asked us why a legacy application has been architected the way it has. And the only answer we have is that, well, it was the person that was before me or the person before them before them. What this then allows us to do is do a discovery on the infrastructure and get up to speed really quickly. Okay, so let's go back to our assets. In fact, let's go back to the command platform itself. So we're going back to the home page. What I can also do here is we can look at identities with and without multi-factor enabled. So let's dive in here. So the filters we have, multi-factor is not true. So it's either false or null. I can then add additional filters in. So let's say we want to focus on administrators who don't have multi-factor. And then, of course, we can have a look at these. We can see, okay, they're in Slack, they're in KnowBe4, Google Workspace, Active Directory. If I come down to this section here and we look at multi-factor being false, I can actually hover over the information and see what we're pulling that property from. So we can see Google Workspace, and then we've actually got information on whether they are an administrator. So in Slack, they are not an admin, but in Google Workspace, they are. Some other interesting info we get from the likes of KnowBe4. So I can scroll down, we can see actually they're prone to phishes as well. Like, wow, okay, 86% prone to phishes, and they're an administrator and they don't have multi-factor. Now, at this point, you might go, okay, that's just one person. I wonder if there's anyone else in the enterprise who is similar. What we can then do is we can actually come to our workspace. I can add a query, and we're going to focus on identities. And let's go and build up a query to say, okay, let's find active identities that are administrators that don't have multi-factor. And also, where's the KnowBe4 section? There we go. And are prone to phishes. Let's go with greater than 50%. So now I'm going to go, okay, we got that one user that had admin privileges that didn't have multi-factor, that was prone to phishes. Now we're going to find out if there's any more of those in the infrastructure. We can apply that. We can hit run. And sure enough, we've got our original user here, but then we've also found these other ones in the infrastructure as well. So we can go, okay, let's have a look at this person here. Let's have a look at their KnowBe4 percentage. This person's 94.3. So yeah, the next thing we would obviously want to do at that point is get them to make sure they enable multi-factor, and maybe we would have a bit of a review of their privileges at this point. But it allows us to, okay, discover interesting things about our infrastructure and then run a query that potentially pulls in more data around what we were looking at. Now, from this point, what I can also do is we can add this as a favorite. So prone to fish. And now what I want to do is I'm going to create some widgets with this query. And what this is going to do is it's going to create some interesting graphics that I can then add to a dashboard. So we've got our data here. I go to the widgets section and I'll give it a second and then it will let me. It's just populating the data set, going off to that graph database in the back end, pulling all of that data in that I'm going to need to then start creating widgets. So you can see here we've got different types of widgets that we can create. So we've got trend lines, we've got donuts, pie charts, areas. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a number, and it's going to measure count, but we can measure lots of other variables here. And maybe I want to add some conditional formatting as well. So what I can do is I can actually get this tile to change color if it's greater than, let's say, 5, and then we can get that to change to a more a color that's maybe a bit more visible compared with the rest of the dashboard that you might create. Trend line, these are really good because these allow you to track it over time. So when you're running your security program, one of the things that you're going to want to be showing to your superiors is a downward trend of vulnerable identities or vulnerable assets. So these are really great for showing the success of what you are doing. So let's come out of that. I've taken you through running a query, creating some widgets. Let's have a look at some of the other dashboards that we have within the platform. So we've got the risk prioritization one. We can see asset source correlation. So here we have the sources. You can see the number of assets we're correlating between the sources. Assets affected by CISA ransomware. So if I wanted to, I could actually click into there and immediately get visibility. We also have some custom risk scoring that we can do. Just to show you how we're making that work in the background, if I just run that particular query, and I'll go to edit so that you can see what we have here. So this is slightly different from the query method that I showed you earlier. We have the ability to run what we call Cypher queries. So this is our query language. And essentially what we're doing is going into more granular detail and creating our own method of risk scoring. So as a customer, you would be able to create your own risk scoring method. You can use things like CVSS as your base score. You can also use the Rapid7 active risk score in this calculation as well, but maybe you'd want to add some contextual data in. So for instance, if there was no EDR installed, or if the EDR had put the asset into quarantine, that might increase the risk score of that asset, for example. So we've gone into Surface Command a fair bit. What I'm going to do is we're going to come back up one level, and I'm going to take you through the remediation hub, because this is a really cool feature of the platform. We're doing a lot of development around this. And by the way, I think Ron's just dropped into the chat. We have the extensions page. So this is the page of all of the connectors for Surface Command. And we're adding to these all the time. At the moment, we are on 141 extensions. At the beginning of the year, we had around 112. So adding lots of these week in, week out. Please make sure you go to extensions.rapid7.com and you can view the full list. So coming into our remediation hub, we spoke earlier about the emergent threat. What I can do is I can look at the remediation details for this emergent threat here. We can see that we have 7 impacted assets for this particular CVE. It's just populating those assets here. Let's have a look at the remediation advice. So we've got the Fusion upgrade. We have the ESXi upgrade as well. We also have the CVE properties. And if I want, I have the Rapid7 blog post up here as well. So just viewing the CVE properties there, I think there was 3 associated CVEs. So VMware Workstation, Fusion, and ESXi, I think was the other one here. Yeah. Okay, so impacted assets, we see here, we're pulling assets from our on-premise and our cloud environments into the same remediation location. So I'm getting all of those important information tags, so site tags, location tags, owner tags as well. This is great for driving accountability, and any custom tags on top of that. Now, what I can also do here is having a look at some of these assets. Maybe I want to see what their wider attack surface is. So I can view the asset. This would take me off to, I think in this instance, inside VM, where I can view more detail on the asset itself. The other thing I can do here is we can view the attack surface of that asset as well. So that will then take me to surface command, where I can view the information of the asset as well. I'll just wait for that to populate. Let's go back to inside VM. So here we have the asset itself. We can see all of those details here. So we've got Fake Fusion is the name of the asset. We can see all of those vulnerabilities there. If I wanted, I could change that to see, okay, are there any exploits available? And again, it will populate that risk, that data. We can see risk over time, vulnerabilities over time. Let's go back to surface command. Yeah, so still on the remediation hub here, we can obviously see you can organize by asset, risk, or vulnerabilities, etc. We have the ability to filter this based on the information that you see here. Going into one of the solutions, we've got a list of impacted assets. We will then be able to see the remediation, the vulnerabilities as well. Just to show you here, there's the best recommended solution that we would provide. We've then got the impacted assets as well. And of course, we can then pivot off to the asset, view the attack surface, etc. View the vulnerabilities of the asset as well. We have the ability to, you see here, expand, contract. We show you high level stats, so number of vulnerabilities, number of impacted assets as well. And then you have the ability to export via CSV. The other thing that you can use the remediation hub for example, let's say we are in surface command. What I can do from an asset here, I can actually pivot back from an asset to the remediation hub. So once we have this item here, I can click view remediations, and this will actually pivot me over to the remediation hub. It will then apply the filter, which is the specific asset ID, and then we can see all of the solutions associated with that asset in the remediation hub. So I just want to show you the external attack surface. And then
David, we have it's last 10 minutes, and everybody needs to go back to work. So
yep. This will take about 2 minutes, and then we'll have some 5 minutes for Q&A at the end before the hour. Okay, so we've got IP addresses, FQDNs that we would add here as seeds. These would then appear in the IPs and domains section. So here I have the ability to, once we've done that, lookups, reverse lookups, we then populate a list of potential assets that have not been given to us, and you can choose to accept, reject, or if it's SAS, you can allocate that here or not reviewed. From there, we then do the discovery on the external side of things. So you can see things like open ports, up and coming or expired security certificates as well. So we're surfacing information. We've got most likely a web server in this instance. Let's go through another example. Let's go with high severity ones. So here we go, port 21. And then we can see here, pure FTP is being used. We've got CPE details there. We can also see related services. So lots of other FTP services being used. And then we can also see security certificates that are up and coming or expired. So surfacing that from an attacker's point of view. So I've gone through a fair bit on the Surface Command platform. Just to kind of recap, we went from the homepage, we're surfacing all of that great information here. We were then able to correlate those sources and actually really understand a lot about the infrastructure itself. So just to come back, we have 3 license types. So we have Surface Command Standalone, Exposure Command, which includes your on-premise and cloud vulnerability management, as well as the active risk prioritization, attack path analysis, executive risk, remediation hub, which we showed you, and our SOAR platform. And then the advanced includes things like our real-time cloud visibility in our cloud platform, as well as a few other things like cloud identity analysis, which is really, really important, cloud threat findings, and our DAST tool. So that is for dynamic application security testing. Okay, I see a question here. Does the data from identity and EDRs correlated with the external attack surface management? So you can use the data from your external attack surface management to then correlate within Surface Command. So you can pull that EASM data into your query builder to then run queries against that. Now, when it comes to identity, we're obviously only surfacing IP addresses and certificates at the moment. So that's not really something you can correlate an identity to. But for example, on the assets side, absolutely, you could correlate that with information from your EDR.
So just to add to that, so let's say, for the example, if you want to know if you have an asset, a list of assets that doesn't have any encryption, doesn't have any EDR active for the last 24 hours, 12 hours, and have administrator on, and you want to know if they are exposed to the outside and have any specific CV that is trending right now. So just created a very simple query that most probably will take standard customer some time to get the results. Here you can do it in a very simple way. And of course, you can create a dashboard and monitor that. I still remember how many customers were calling us when they were asking to get all the trending CVEs, alerts that coming out, Log4j, ES6, so many, trying to understand where does it impact them. So I think the answer here is you can get it very fast and you can understand, okay, there is a risk, but I can get the context around the risk. Is that relevant to me? Assets that are impacted by the risk, and what are the compensating controls that I have in my environment for that for those assets. So then I can take more calculated risk. Okay, I have 9 assets impacted, but I have compensating controls for 8. I need to deal with 1 asset. So next time your management will call you and ask, okay, is there any impact for us? You can create you can click on the alert here, and get to the remediation app and get full visibility across the environment. I would say almost a click of a button. This is like the reality here, because we are aggregating data from different security tools that you have in your environment, enriching with external attack surface, and allowing you to get the results very, very fast in a graphical way, of course.
David, thank you very much for joining us. Aaron, thank you as well. אני רוצה להודות לכולם, תודה רבה על הזמן שהקדשתם לנו, ונאחל לכולנו בשורות טובות ושבוע טוב.